The neon glow of Neo-San Francisco cast a synthetic, perpetual twilight across the panoramic window of the penthouse suite. Elias Vance stood there, a glass of amber liquid cold in his hand, contemplating the city lights that seemed to pulse with an almost predatory energy. He was a man of routine, a lead architect on the Atlas terraforming project, engaged to the brilliant and practical Isabella. His life was meticulously planned, predictable, and utterly human. It was exactly 2 weeks before his wedding, and the digitized image of Isabella, smiling in a white dress next to his own projected silhouette, floated in a small, elegant hologram beside the window, a final, automated reminder of a perfect future. A sound, not of a door opening but of air itself displacing, made the hair on the back of his neck prickle. He didn't turn. He didn't have to. The air grew suddenly cold, thick with an ozone scent, and the city lights outside seemed to dim as if a power drain had been activated. The reflection on the glass before him shifted. A silhouette materialized, impossibly tall, unervingly defined against the sprawling cityscape. When he finally forced himself to turn, the glass slipped from his fingers, hitting the sound-dampening rug with a muffled thud. She stood barely 5 feet from him, but she felt like an entire galaxy. She was sculpted in shadow and light, wearing a skin-tight suit of deep, matte black that seemed to absorb the light, only to release it in faint, glowing red lines tracing intricate patterns across her body. Her skin was a startling, luminous silver gray. But it was her features that seized his breath: high alien cheekbones, a severe mouth, and eyes that burned with a predatory, intense crimson, glowing like twin solar flares. From her back, enormous, obsidian wings, folded and razor-sharp, brushed the polished floor, making a faint, dry scrape. She was a creature of myth, and she was standing in his meticulously sterilized 35th floor apartment. The holographic image of Isabella seemed to flicker nervously in her presence. Elias Vance. Her voice resonated, a deep, melodic hum that felt less like sound and more like a vibration inside his very bones. It was a language he didn't know, yet he understood every syllable perfectly. Who are you? How did you get in here? His voice was a pathetic rasp compared to her cosmic tone. He took a staggering step back, his eyes glued to the menacing wings. She tilted her head, her crimson gaze sweeping over his human form. His pressed shirt, his mundane watch, his shock of brown hair, with an expression that was part ancient wisdom, part devastating sorrow. I did not get in, she stated, taking a slow, deliberate step towards him. The air seemed to heat around her. I returned. Your security protocols are irrelevant, as are the petty temporal constraints of this timeline. He shook his head, frantically searching for a panic button or a hidden weapon. Temporal? Look, if this is some kind of corporate joke, it's not funny. I'm calling the authorities. She didn't move. She merely raised an elegant, pointed hand. You will do no such thing. The air pressure around his throat instantly tightened, not physically, but with an invisible force that made speech impossible. He choked, clawing at his neck, terror flooding his system. You have forgotten much, my love, she whispered, and the intensity of the word love was like a sharp blade. The force released him and he gasped, leaning heavily against the wall. I have never seen you before in my life. Get out of my apartment now. Her lips, which were a shade of blue-black, curled into a sad, knowing smile. That is the consequence of the great divergence. This life, this Elias Vance who plans to marry the human Isabella, is a pale echo. A safe harbor for a soul that should be fighting on the edges of the galaxy. You are a memory I placed here for safekeeping, a fragment of yourself protected from the oblivion plague. She pointed a terrifying finger at the floating hologram of his fiancée. That woman is not your true consort. She is part of the illusion, the perfect, comfortable cage built to house the most dangerous weapon in this sector of space. Elias felt a cold dread settle deep in his stomach, far colder than the air she emitted. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm an architect. I design habitats, I don't fight wars. You are Ethan, commander of the Lyra 17 fleet, and the only being capable of wielding the Starlight engine. And I, she paused, her crimson eyes boring into his soul, I am Seraphina of the Vindicar race. I am the one who tore the timeline to save you. And I am your wife. The word hung in the sterile, neon-lit air, a bomb dropped into his predictable existence. He looked from the fierce, dark-winged creature to the benign, smiling hologram of Isabella. The world he knew had just fractured. He was trapped between the cold, hard reality of his past 2 decades and the terrifying, magnetic pull of this alien woman's impossible claim. The sudden silence was heavy, thick with the unsaid history Seraphina had just dumped into Elias's meticulous, ordinary life. He stared at her, the fear slowly calcifying into a hard knot of disbelief. Ethan? Starlight Engine? Look, Elias said, trying to inject some authority into his trembling voice. I don't know who you think I am, but I'm just Elias Vance. My identity is verified on the Galactic Standard database. I have bills, a mortgage, and a fiancé who thinks I'm home finalizing our seating charts, not arguing with a winged vampire. He emphasized the last word, the red glow in her eyes chilling him. Serafina's expression remained tragically serene. Vampire is the crude human term for my race, the Vindicar. We consume ambient life force energy, chi, soul resonance, to sustain our temporal forms. We are not blood drinkers, Elias. We are reality stabilizers. And your resonance, Ethan's resonance, is the only one strong enough to anchor me here without collapsing this entire timeline bubble. She took another step, and this time, Elias didn't recoil. He was paralyzed by a strange, dizzying attraction, a sense of familiarity fighting against every rational fiber in his brain. You don't have to believe my words, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerously intimate low. I can show you memories, but the transmission risks your stability. I'll start with something simple. The proof that resides within this simple, manufactured life. Serafina moved past the coffee table, her wings barely clearing the expensive light fixture. She stopped at his private office desk where a sleek, encrypted data pad sat. Your childhood was spent in the northern sector of this continent, yes? Near the deactivated Cascade mining colony? Yes, Elias admitted, his throat dry. We moved there after my father died. It was cheap. You remember the strange fever you had when you were 8? The week you claimed the stars spoke to you? Elias frowned. That week had been chalked up to a severe case of the flu and an overactive imagination. What does that have to do with anything? Everything. Serafina reached out and placed her hand flat on the surface of his desk. The wood immediately darkened beneath her touch, absorbing the light. The digital clock on the desk began to flicker wildly. You were not sick. You were experiencing the first temporal echoes of your true self. During that fever, you subconsciously etched a complex schematic onto your bedside wall, a design so advanced it shouldn't exist for 5,000 years. She focused her crimson gaze on the data pad. Password, Cascade 0417 stars. Elias stiffened. How did you know that? That was the password he had set years ago, a nonsensical combination known only to him, linking the colony name, the date he'd gotten sick, April 17th, and his feverish delusion. I taught you that cipher, Ethan, Serafina replied, a ghost of tenderness touching her voice. It was the code to our private communications channel during the Ether Wars. The data pad flashed, unlocking immediately. Serafina tapped the screen, opening a hidden archive Elias didn't even know existed. A single 3D file appeared. She projected it into the air above the desk. It was a schematic. A complex, spiraling diagram of mechanical and energy conduits. Elias stared at it, a wave of vertigo washing over him. It wasn't anything he'd designed for Atlas. It was too intricate, too alien. Yet, the structure, the perfect efficiency of the geometry, it felt profoundly, terrifyingly familiar. This is the Starlight Engine's core schematic, Serafina stated simply. You designed this in a panic, transferred it subconsciously into this fabricated life, hoping to safeguard the knowledge. You were 8 years old in this body, Elias, yet you successfully encrypted and hid the key to interdimensional travel. She moved closer to him, her powerful, beautiful, terrifying form dominating his entire field of vision. You are not Elias Vance. You are an unparalleled genius soldier who placed himself into stasis within a time bubble to escape an overwhelming enemy. I am the only one who broke through to wake you. He stumbled back further, his hands running through his hair. His rational mind screamed psychopath, hallucination, brain parasite. But the password, the schematic, he couldn't explain them away. He had no memory of designing that thing, yet he instinctively knew how every part functioned. I need air, he choked out, turning towards the apartment's smart lock door. I need to call Isabella. She'll know what to do. She's stable. Isabella is a beautiful, programmed distraction, Serafina countered, her voice hardening. She is a benign sentience designed to provide the illusion of a fulfilling life so that the true Ethan remained dormant. Do not waste the energy. You cannot leave. Elias slammed his hand onto the door lock panel, punching in his code. The door remained stubbornly sealed. He punched it again, harder, his heart hammering against his ribs. Override. Door cycle. The door panel flickered red and a familiar, deep voice boomed from the speaker, a voice Elias recognized as the building's central AI security system. Access denied. Subject Vance. Biosignature match detected. External influence detected. Protocol 7V Alpha in effect. Containment field established. No outgoing or incoming communications permitted. Elias froze, his face inches from the inert door. Protocol 7V Alpha? That's not in the security manual. It is now, Serafina said, a flicker of red running down her wings. When I stabilized the temporal anchor, I had to ensure your safety. I temporarily integrated a Vindicar shield protocol into this building's security system. It sees me as the system owner, and you as the highly valuable asset. She walked up behind him, her presence radiating power that made his knees weak. You are trapped here with me, Ethan. And the enemy that forced us into this desperate measure is not far behind. We have less time than you think. You need to remember who you are, or our entire civilization will burn. The city outside, once a symbol of his safe, modern life, now looked like a distant, irrelevant painting behind an unbreakable glass cage. Elias Vance was gone. Only a terrified man named Ethan, trapped with his impossibly beautiful vampiric alien wife, remained. The realization that he was utterly contained, not just in the room but in a Serafina-controlled reality bubble, hit Elias with a physical force. He stopped pushing the door, turning slowly to face the being who claimed his soul. The panic gave way to a cold, dangerous curiosity. If this was a lie, it was the most meticulously constructed high-stakes lie in human history. If it was the truth, his entire life was a dream. You can't just force memories into someone's head, Elias said, his voice flat. It's called psychological warfare. I won't let you taint my mind. Serafina moved with a fluid, terrifying grace, stepping away from the desk. The glowing red lines on her suit pulsed faintly. You misunderstand, Elias. I don't need to force memories. They are not gone. They are merely dormant, layered beneath decades of synthetic experience. I need to dissolve the shell. And I will not lie to you, it will be excruciating. The merging of two timelines in one consciousness rarely occurs without friction. She extended her hand toward him. It was a gesture both inviting and absolute. We start now. Every moment we waste, the Shade Fleet draws closer to the boundary of this sector. They will not be looking for the architect, Elias Vance. They are hunting Ethan, the commander. Elias looked at her hand. His hand, the one that drafted blueprints and signed contracts, felt useless. He saw the potential for agonizing pain, for the total dissolution of his identity, but he also saw the Starlight engine schematic in his mind's eye, a sudden, blinding clarity of its complex function. The sheer impossibility of his current life now felt heavier than Serafina's claims. And if I refuse? He asked, not as a threat, but as a beaten man seeking the rules of his imprisonment. Then I will be forced to draw the required stabilization energy directly, and that will kill the human shell, leaving Ethan's consciousness intact but severely fragmented. You will be a weapon without a soldier. It will be a tragic loss, considering the intimacy we once shared. Serafina's red eyes held no malice, only grim necessity. He stared at the ground for a long minute, then up at the indifferent, beautiful city. He had loved that city. He had loved his life. But he had designed that life to be safe. A life that now felt brittle and fake. No forced entry, he conceded, taking a deep, shaky breath. If I do this, it's because I choose to face whatever absurd, impossible truth you're offering. But if you hurt Isabella, I swear to every god you alien folk believe in, I will find a way to kill you. A faint, victorious light flickered behind Serafina's crimson gaze. Isabella will remain untouched. The illusion will remain functional until we are forced to leave this dimension. Your choice honors the man I married, Ethan. He slowly raised his arm. As his fingers brushed the cold, silver-gray skin of her hand, the sensation was like gripping a live wire. Serafina's power flared. The red light tracing her suit intensified, and the air in the room thrummed. Her wings unfurled an inch, rustling like dry silk, bathing the penthouse in shadow. She locked her eyes with his, and the crimson glow was overwhelming. Do not fight the flow, she commanded, her voice now a simultaneous whisper and scream, echoing from everywhere and nowhere. Let the shell crack. A crushing pressure immediately wrapped around Elias's skull. It wasn't pain, it was the sensation of his neural pathways being rewritten at impossible speed. He heard 1,000 voices, a rush of alien languages, and saw shapes and colors that defied earthly physics. Then the memories began. Flash, the bridge of the Aegis. Elias felt the crushing gravity of a massive vessel under attack. He wasn't wearing an architect's shirt. He wore the heavy metallic armor of a commander. His name wasn't Elias, it was Ethan. The voice in his helmet was his own, but sharper, authoritative. Serafina. Their hull breaches are critical. Redirecting power to the Starlight engine shield now. He saw Serafina, but younger, wearing warrior's metal, her wings flared in the red glare of the battle station. She wasn't his captor, she was his equal, her face streaked with battle dust and determination. She was screaming something about the Kronos mine. He felt an overwhelming love, a connection forged not in quiet suburban dinners, but in the white-hot forge of warfare. He felt her hand grasp his, not cold but warm with life and shared terror. Flash, the vow on Xylos 7. The scene shifted. He was standing on a crystal-laden desert planet beneath a sky of swirling violet gas. He was laughing, a free, unrestrained sound that Elias Vance had never made. He was holding Seraphina's face in his hands. Her eyes were not burning red, they were a softer, deep violet, the color of her natural Vindicar state. "We are bound, Ethan," she whispered, pressing her forehead to his. "Through time, through dimensions until the void consumes us both." A feeling of absolute belonging, a total fusion of two souls, flooded him, replacing the loneliness he hadn't realized he felt in his safe life. Flashed the betrayal. The laughter died. He saw a flash of silver, a flicker of deceit. A trusted ally, a Vindicar named Caruel, standing over a deactivated energy conduit. Caruel's eyes were the cold, hard red of the corrupted Vindicar, the Shade Fleet's genesis. "The engine will be ours, Ethan. And Seraphina will be the key to our new power source." Ethan tried to run, tried to scream, but the image dissolved into the piercing shriek of an activated temporal device. Elias screamed. The pain of memory colliding with non-memory was unbearable, like a spiritual amputation. He fell to his knees, clutching his head, the neon city lights spinning. He tasted metallic dust and blood that wasn't there. Seraphina knelt down, her grip on his hand never wavering. She was the anchor in the storm of his fragmented past. "The lie is breaking, my Ethan," she said, her voice strained. "Caruel is hunting us. He knew we would hide you. He knew I would follow. He corrupted his own people to form the Shade Fleet. The alien vampires you fear are his drones, consuming worlds to power their temporal weapons. We must flee this dimension now." The pain subsided, leaving behind a raw, echoing awareness. Elias still saw the penthouse, the glass, the floating hologram of Isabella. But now he also saw the skeletal remains of the Aegis, the violet sky of Xylos 7, and the treacherous face of Caruel. He was Elias Vance, the architect, and he was Ethan, the commander. The man who was engaged to Isabella had just remembered that he was married to Seraphina. He opened his burning eyes and looked at Seraphina. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with a rush of familiarity, an almost hormonal recognition of his true partner. "The Starlight Engine," Ethan Elias rasped, the military name feeling heavy and correct on his tongue. "It's not just a shield. It's the key to the convergence." Seraphina smiled, a tired, heartbreaking relief washing over her alien features. "Welcome back, my husband. Now we run." A loud, piercing alarm shrieked through the penthouse, this time overriding Seraphina's installed protocol. It wasn't the building alarm. It was an alien warning signal, deep, resonant, and universally terrifying. The outer windows began to frost over with a thick, crystalline layer. "They're here," Seraphina said, rising swiftly, her wings snapping open to their full, magnificent span. "Caruel's scouts have localized the temporal signature. We have seconds before they breach the bubble." She grabbed Ethan's arm and pulled him towards the main window, ignoring the sealed door. "The Starlight Engine schematic is here," Seraphina declared, pointing at his desk. "We must retrieve the physical data core. And we are not leaving through the door." The alien alarm, a sound that vibrated not in the air but in the very foundation of the building, intensified. The crystalline frost Seraphina mentioned was spreading rapidly, turning the vast window panel opaque. They were being encased. "The physical data core," Ethan Elias repeated, the memory of its purpose now cold and distinct in his mind. He sprang toward the desk, ripping the sleek data pad from its cradle. His hands moved with an efficiency that Elias Vance, the architect, had never possessed. He didn't just grab it. He expertly disconnected the pad's internal hard drive module, a tiny metallic cylinder, and tucked it into a hidden, armored pocket in his trousers, a pocket that had been sewn in by Seraphina's residual temporal energy. "Hold on, Ethan," Seraphina commanded. Her obsidian wings spread fully, slicing through the air with a powerful swoosh. The movement was beautiful and terrifying, a creature of cosmic destiny about to shatter a mundane world. Before he could react, she seized him, her arm wrapping tightly around his waist. Her suit's red lines flared, connecting with the residual energy in his armor pocket. He felt a sickening lurch as she projected a massive spike of Vindicar power directly at the window. Engaging temporal override. Serafina roared, and the sound was swallowed by a deafening crash. The thick, reinforced glass didn't just break. It vaporized in a shower of incandescent dust and fragmented time. The massive pressure differential hit them, but Serafina's grip was an unbreakable vice. A torrent of Neo-San Francisco's night air, smelling of rain and manufactured oxygen, blasted into the penthouse. They launched themselves into the void. The fall was dizzying. 35 floors dropped away beneath them. Ethan Elias braced himself, but Serafina was already activating the latent technology in her wings. They weren't just decorative. They were gravity sinks and propulsion fields. They beat once, and the descent slowed to a controlled, heart-stopping glide. Below, the city lights blurred into streaks of color. Above, 2 new lights appeared, not stars but rapidly descending metallic shapes. They were dark, angular, and emitting the same dreadful, resonant alarm. Carwell's drones. Serafina hissed, fighting the turbulence. Basic interceptors. They're locked onto your signature Ethan. We need altitude and cover. A powerful blast of energy, a deep crimson beam, streaked past Serafina's head, vaporizing a drone that had tracked them from the ground. Ethan realized the danger wasn't just Carwell, it was the Vindicar Shade fleet. We can't outrun them in a populated zone. Ethan yelled over the roar of the wind, the commander's instinct surging. The old Atlas maintenance route, the abandoned Skyway. It's shielded from most aerial surveillance. Serafina followed the instruction instantly, banking sharply. You remember the routes good. The core memories are stabilizing. They arced through the towering holographic advertisements, dodging traffic drones and narrowly missing the glass roof of a massive public transit hub. The chase was loud and violent. The 2 Shade drones were relentlessly pursuing them, their energy weapons singing through the night. Just as they reached the skeletal, decaying structure of the abandoned Skyway, a forgotten relic of an earlier, less efficient city plan, one of the drones managed a solid hit. The energy beam struck Serafina's left wing. She cried out, a sharp alien sound of pure pain. Her flight stuttered, and they spiraled downward, crashing onto the wide, dusty metal platform of the Skyway's maintenance level. They skidded across the rusted metal, Serafina shielding Ethan with her body. When they finally stopped, the air was thick with smoke and the smell of ozone. Serafina pulled herself up, wincing. Her left wing shimmered, the obsidian material fractured, and the glowing red lines that traced it were dark and inert. Damaged propulsion. I can't sustain full flight, she gasped, leaning heavily against a steel beam. They will land and engage on foot. Carwell prefers to capture, not destroy. Ethan was already moving. He felt a rush of adrenaline and strategic thought. The Skyway was a maze of deteriorating struts and defunct machinery. It was perfect for evasion. We go below, Ethan said, grabbing her hand and pulling her into a dark maintenance tunnel entrance. The architect's knowledge of the city's underbelly had just become the commander's tactical advantage. This structure has a hidden subterranean railway access, a drain tunnel that runs right out to the old orbital scrapyard. I used it once during a survey. A drain tunnel? Serafina lifted a skeptical eyebrow, though she followed him into the narrow, dusty passage. Yes. It's crude, but it leads to the only place in the city with enough material to mask our signatures, the orbital scrapyard. That's where you left the Aegis's escape pod, didn't you, Serafina? She stopped dead in the cramped tunnel. Her eyes widened, the crimson glow intensified with surprise and pride. Ethan, you remembered the coordinates of the Stinger? Not consciously, he muttered, scrambling over a pile of debris. But I know where I would hide the only emergency craft that could run Carwell. It's beneath a pile of decommissioned Saturn-class transports. I designed that section, Serafina. I hid our escape route inside this fake life. The pounding footsteps of the Shade drones echoed from the platform above. They had landed. Come on, Ethan urged, pulling her deeper into the dark. Architects always build a back door. As they moved through the darkness, Serafina smiled for the first time, a fierce, genuine flash of white teeth against her silver skin. I truly did marry a remarkable man. They had only minutes. The drain tunnel was wet, foul-smelling, and clogged with centuries of city refuse. But for the commander and his alien wife, it was the final desperate path to the hidden Stinger pod, their only way out of this planet and back into the interstellar war that awaited them. The drain tunnel was a dark, cramped artery beneath the city's metallic skin, forcing Serafina to keep her damaged wings folded tightly against her back. The wet, earthy smell was a stark contrast to the sterile air of the penthouse. Ethan, his human mind still reeling from the torrent of alien memories, moved with a decisive, calculated pace that belonged entirely to the commander. The scrapyard is half a click from the tunnel exit, Ethan said, his voice echoing off the damp concrete. We'll have minimal cover. The Stinger stealth module will be dormant after decades. We need to activate it manually before full launch sequence. Manual override, Serafina muttered, her crimson eyes scanning the darkness. A classic Ethan safety measure. Slow but unbreakable. Just as they reached the end of the tunnel, a loud thump resonated from the entrance they had just left. The Shade drones were close behind. They burst out of the tunnel mouth into a sprawling, chaotic landscape, the orbital scrapyard. It was a desolate field spanning miles, piled high with rust-eaten hulls of decommissioned star transports, shattered atmospheric shields and mounds of non-recyclable metal slag. It was an overwhelming industrial graveyard, perfect for hiding and perfect for ambush. The stench of burnt metal and industrial decay hung heavy in the air. Ethan immediately oriented himself. There. The pile of Saturn-class hulls. The Stinger is beneath the third transport from the north. They began to sprint across the uneven terrain, Ethan leading the way, his movements quick and low. Serafina, despite her injured wing, kept pace, her superior Vindicar strength pulling her forward. Suddenly, two figures dropped from the skeleton of a colossal cargo freighter 50 meters ahead of them. Carwell's drones. They were tall, heavily armored, and their helmets glowed with the same menacing crimson as Serafina's eyes, but cold, devoid of life. They anticipated the scrapyard. Serafina snarled. Carol knows all your tactical habits, Ethan. Then we changed the habit. Ethan snapped back. He grabbed a heavy, broken beam of titanium from the ground. The architect's hands should have buckled under the weight. The commander's hands gripped it like a lightsaber. Engage evasive patterns. I'll take the lead, he shouted, throwing the beam with impossible force. It spun end over end, striking one of the drones in the chest plate with a clang that echoed across the scrapyard. The drone staggered but didn't fall. Serafina immediately deployed a defensive energy pulse from her non-injured right wing, hitting the ground between them and the drones. The ground exploded in a shower of sparks and pulverized concrete, slowing the pursuit. They're too fast, she yelled. The Stinger is still too far. We need to draw their fire away from the escape route. Ethan stopped dead, surveying the scene with renewed focus. He noticed a massive half-collapsed fuel silo 20 meters to their right, still containing residual highly volatile coolant. The silo, Ethan commanded, pointing. Run for the Saturn hulls. I need you to draw fire towards the silo. The hull integrity is compromised. Ethan, that's insane. The blast radius. I know my blueprints, Serafina. The shell of the silo is designed to vent pressure upwards in a catastrophic failure. It will create a perfect smoke and debris cloud, our window for the Stinger. Trust, deep and absolute, flashed in Serafina's eyes. Without another word, she veered towards the pile of Saturn hulls, moving in wide, weaving patterns. The two drones immediately shifted focus to the faster, more powerful threat, opening fire. Their crimson beams sliced through the air, hitting the metal hulls with deafening impacts. Ethan stayed low, sprinting towards the silo. He could hear the drone's weapon discharge and the sharp thwick as the beams narrowly missed Serafina. She was buying him precious seconds. He reached the silo and saw the cracked service panel he remembered from the old schematics. He plunged his fingers into the crack, ignoring the ripping pain in his hands, and hauled the panel open. Inside, a cascade of glowing, chilled coolant vapor hissed out. The drones, having cornered Serafina, realized their mistake and turned their attention back to the unprotected Ethan. 3 crimson beams converged on him. Ethan didn't have time to dodge. He threw himself against the silo's main valve, a massive wheel, using the last reserves of his Vindicar-fueled strength. He turned it with a furious, final effort, sending a geyser of highly pressurized coolant mixed with volatile vapor into the air. The beams hit the silo wall just as the vapor reached the concentration point. Kaboom! The resulting explosion was blinding. A thunderous roar shook the scrapyard. A massive plume of smoke, fire, and debris, just as Ethan had predicted, erupted straight into the night sky. The two drones were caught in the blast wave, their advanced systems overloaded, crashing down in twisted, inert heaps of metal. Serafina rushed to the crater where Ethan had been. He lay half-buried beneath a mound of hot debris, his clothes torn, his body bruised but alive. Ethan, she cried, pulling him free. The window, he gasped, spitting out dirt. Now, go. They scrambled the last few yards to the pile of Saturn-class transports. Ethan, fueled by urgency, located the designated hull and, with Serafina's concentrated power, they blasted a hidden access hatch on the transport's underbelly. Inside the dark, recessed opening, nestled beneath decades of space grime, was the Stinger. It was a small, sleek vessel, more needle than ship, designed for pure speed and minimal detection. They scrambled inside the cramped cockpit. Ethan slammed the hatch shut. The interior was immediately bathed in the faint, familiar blue glow of dormant control panels. Powering main systems, Ethan recited, his hands moving over the foreign controls with the absolute certainty of a pilot coming home. Serafina, activate the stealth module. Manual sync, input the Vindicar temporal signature now. As Serafina entered the complex, alien codes, a third, larger entity appeared above the smoke cloud, Carwell's command vessel. It was huge, dark, and already initiating a heavy orbital sweep. They're locking us. Serafina yelled, her voice tight with panic. Ethan ignored the external threat. He focused on the panel, his breath held. Engine stabilization. 10%. 50%. 90%. The cockpit hummed. Ethan slammed the throttle. The Stinger didn't lift off, it simply disappeared. It tore a microscopic hole in the fabric of the atmosphere and shot into the sky, leaving the temporal signature of Elias Vance and his entire Earth life behind, masked by the explosive dust and the powerful stealth field. Within seconds they pierced the troposphere. Ethan, breathing hard, finally deactivated the heavy maneuvering system. He looked over at Serafina. She was exhausted, her silver skin pale, but her eyes held a fierce light. "We made it," he whispered, feeling the cold, vast emptiness of space press against the hull. "We made it, Ethan," Serafina corrected, placing her hand on his armored forearm. "But this was only the first step. Carwell knows we have the data core. We are running to the edge of the universe and we cannot stop until we restart the Starlight engine." The confines of the Stinger were intimate and cold. The cockpit, barely large enough for two, was illuminated by the faint blue glow of the navigation screen displaying a jump route so complex it made Elias Vance's architect mind ache, yet Ethan, the commander, instinctively understood the trajectory. Elias sat in the pilot's chair, his hands resting on the controls. His body was battered from the scrapyard explosion, but the alien memories had already begun to accelerate his recovery, mending tissue at an impossible speed. He was still wearing the remnants of his Earth clothes, a stark contrast to the sophisticated alien command chair. Serafina was meticulously repairing her damaged wing using a focused pulse of energy from her fingertips. The obsidian material of the wing slowly knitted itself back together, the red lines reconnecting like delicate wires. "We have initiated the long jump sequence," Serafina said, her voice softer now, stripped of the battle urgency. "We are headed for the Cygnus Rift. It will take us weeks to reach the rendezvous point, even at max temporal velocity." Ethan turned, his gaze heavy. "The Cygnus Rift. The last untouched system before the void. That's where the Aegis is hidden, isn't it? Our flagship." Serafina nodded slowly. "The Aegis and the fully armed Starlight engine. The only weapons capable of creating a convergence barrier to repel the Shade fleet." "But Carol," Ethan paused, the name burning with a fresh resentment that had nothing to do with Elias Vance's life. "Carwell knows the Aegis is our target. Why hasn't he found it yet?" "Because the Aegis is protected by the Ethan paradox," Serafina explained, leaning forward. "The ship is keyed to your current consciousness signature, Ethan. Not your past one. When I hid you in the time bubble, the Aegis became dormant. Carwell has been scanning for the commander he knew, the one he betrayed. He hasn't found the one who became the architect." Athone rubbed his temples, the effort of reconciling the two identities an ongoing, agonizing process. "So my years as Elias Vance, they were the ultimate stealth cloak." "Exactly. The ultimate distraction," Serafina confirmed. "But now you're awake. The paradox is dissolving. We must reach the Aegis and merge your consciousness core with the ship's mainframe before Carol can pinpoint your new signature." A sudden surge of doubt, Elias's doubt, hit him hard. "Wait, my consciousness core? What about Isabella? What about my life?" He gestured vaguely towards the viewport, where Earth was now a distant, shimmering blue marble. "You said the illusion would remain functional." Serafina's expression softened, a deep, maternal sorrow replacing the warrior's intensity. "It will. Isabella is not a villain, Ethan. She is a highly advanced, localized sentient program, designed by my people to maintain your psychological well-being. She is capable of love, of routine, of everything you needed to keep the commander dormant and happy." She reached out and gently touched his cheek. "But she is not me. She is not the woman who stood beside you when the stars bled, who felt your grief when we lost the Lyra fleet. The life you had was a perfect, beautiful lie. I know it hurts, but that world was never truly yours." The words sliced through him. He remembered the feeling of proposing to Isabella, the shared laughter over kitchen counters, the plans for their dream home. That love felt real organic. How could it all be data? And what about you? Ethan challenged, turning the emotional pain into sudden suspicion. The Vindicar, you consume life force. What? Is this whole rescue just a ploy to bring back your power source? Serafina straightened, the crimson glow in her eyes flickering with ancient pride. Vindicar physiology is complex, Ethan. We draw energy to stabilize our temporal forms, yes. But the red eyes you fear are the mark of temporal stress. When I crossed the dimensional gap to find you, my core was severely depleted. I need your unique resonance, the starlight energy, to stabilize or I will collapse. I am not drinking your life, I am tethering us both to reality. She paused, her gaze steady. And the energy I consume is shared with you, Ethan. It is what made Elias Vance's memory so sharp, his body so strong during the escape. It is the bond of our race and the bond of our marriage. She then pressed a key on the console, and a holographic image shimmered into existence between them. Not a wedding photo but a schematic of the Starlight engine. It was even more detailed than the one he'd seen in the penthouse. We need 3 things to activate the engine: the data core, which you have, the consciousness merge, which we will perform upon arrival, and the rift key. Serafina pointed to a specific sequence on the schematic. The rift key is the final encryption layer, a complex melody cipher designed only for your hands. It's stored not in the computer, but in a hidden microcache on Xylos 7. Ethan's mind immediately flashed to the memory of their wedding on the crystal-laden desert planet. Xylos 7. The system Carwell bombarded to dust. You want us to go back to a dead world. It's not dead, just dormant, Serafina countered, a fierce determination returning to her voice. It's the one place Carwell would assume we would never return to. Our first tactical jump must be to Xylos 7. We retrieve the key and then we run to the Aegis. The tension in the cramped cockpit was palpable. Ethan felt the full weight of his past life's destiny settle upon his shoulders. He was not going home. He was heading into the war he was created to fight. His love for Isabella was fading, replaced by the deep, complex loyalty and terror he felt for the alien woman sitting beside him, his true wife, Serafina. He reached out and placed his hand on the throttle, the commander taking full control. Set the jump coordinates for Xylos 7. Time to go back to where it all began. The long jump sequence was unsettling. The Stinger felt less like a ship and more like a tear in the cosmos, hurtling through impossible distances. 4 days, the cockpit was a silent, pressurized world of 2 conflicting souls. Elias Vance was fading, replaced by the grim resolve of Ethan, yet the ghost of the architect's safe, predictable life lingered. Ethan worked the navigation console with flawless precision, plotting the jump angles needed to evade Carwell's predicted pursuit routes. Serafina sat beside him, monitoring the dwindling energy reserves and the residual temporal distortion signature they left behind. One rotation, Ethan suddenly slammed his hand on the console, startling Serafina. I keep seeing the apartment, he admitted, his voice rough. The hologram of Isabella. It's not just a program, Serafina. When I saw her I felt peace. The kind of peace I never felt leading a fleet. He turned to her, the confusion and pain in his eyes unmistakable. If you loved me, if you truly are my wife, why did you let me live that lie for 20 years? Serafina paused her work, her crimson eyes softening with a deep, weary sorrow. That is the question that haunts me, Ethan. She reached out but stopped short of touching him. When Carwell activated the Kronos mine, our escape pod was badly damaged. I could only create one stable temporal bubble, a place of absolute stasis. If I had brought you out immediately, you would have been hunted and killed before your memory stabilized. The peace, Ethan, that was my gift. I built you a life of simple human joy because I knew that the Ethan I loved was tired. He carried the weight of a dying civilization. I protected your mind even from the war, even from me. A single, shimmering tear, the color of deep violet, traced a path down her silver cheek. It was the ultimate sacrifice for a Vindicar. To surrender my husband to a life that did not contain me. The raw honesty in her voice shattered his remaining resistance. It wasn't manipulation, it was a desperate act of love. Xylos 7, Ethan said, his gaze returning to the void, his voice now purely the commander's, cold, resolute. Let's focus on the rift key. We're dropping out of the jump stream in 3 hours. Prepare for atmospheric entry. 3 hours later, the Stinger screamed through the ruined atmosphere of Xylos 7. The planet was a monument to defeat. The swirling violet gas Serafina remembered from their wedding had been replaced by perpetual, gray dust storms. The crystal deserts were fractured, melted into glassy slag by Carwell's bombardment. The very air was ionized and hostile. No organic life detected. Environmental stability, critical, Ethan reported, guiding the Stinger toward the surface through sheer instinct. The coordinates for the cache are near the shattered citadel, where we took our vows. Land us in the old geothermal vent shaft, Ethan, Serafina directed. It should still offer temporary protection from the solar flares and the remaining orbital debris. Ethan expertly maneuvered the ship into a deep, jagged chasm, the Stinger's sleek hull barely scraping the rock. They landed with a heavy thud in the darkness, cutting the engines immediately to minimize their heat signature. We move on foot, Ethan commanded, already opening the weapons locker, a concealed compartment that held 2 compact, powerful Lyra 17 pulse rifles and 2 environmental survival packs. Serafina's eyes widened when she saw Ethan seamlessly grip the rifle. You remember the weapon protocols. I remember the kinetic dispersal rate, the energy recharge time, and the sight radius, Ethan replied grimly. Elias Vance spent hours playing combat simulations on his Earth pad. It wasn't a game. It was my neural net practicing. They exited the Stinger. The air was thin, smelling of sulfur and radiation. The only sound was the howling, corrosive wind. Above them, the ruined canyon wall stretched up into the dust-choked gray sky. The cache is 200 meters north, inside the Citadel ruins, Serafina whispered, pulling the hood of her survival pack over her head. It's guarded by a basic Vindicar sentinel. It should only respond to my biosignature. They navigated the treacherous terrain of the chasm, scrambling over broken shards of crystalline rock. The ruins of the Citadel were a haunting sight. Massive arches of white stone, now cracked and listing, monuments to a life that was violently stolen. As they approached the epicenter of the ruins, a figure materialized from the rubble. It was tall, clad in armor similar to Serafina's, but made of pale, cracked ceramic. It stood completely still, its head tilted, awaiting a command. Sentinel, report status, Serafina transmitted mentally. The Sentinel responded with a low, mechanical hum. Status, stabilizing. Perimeter integrity, breached. Intruder detected. Target, non-Vindicar male. Serafina frowned. Non-Vindicar? It should be recognizing Ethan's unique signature. Before she could adjust the command, the Sentinel raised its massive, archaic pulse cannon. Protocol Delta 9, neutralize non-Vindicar male. Preserve Vindicar female for memory retrieval. Farewell. Serafina gasped, pulling Ethan behind a shattered pillar. He anticipated our return. He must have corrupted the Sentinel's core programming remotely before he left. It sees you as a threat and me as an asset. The Sentinel's cannon fired. A blinding white beam of energy vaporized the rock where Ethan had just stood. It wants you alive, Serafina, Ethan shouted over the impact, leveling his pulse rifle. But it wants Elias Vance dead. The corruption must recognize the human residue in my signature. We can't destroy it. The Sentinel protects the cache. Serafina cried, firing a series of rapid shots, which merely bounced harmlessly off the Sentinel's aged but powerful armor. Then we separated from the cache. Ethan commanded. He began sprinting away from the Citadel, drawing the Sentinel's aggressive fire. Keep firing at its legs, Serafina. Slow it down. The Sentinel shifted its heavy attention to the fleeing male, unleashing a constant barrage of white-hot plasma. Ethan ran, not randomly but toward a deep fissure in the ground, a weakness in the planetary crust he recalled from a pre-war topographical survey. He reached the fissure, turned, and fired a precision shot at a brittle section of rock just behind the Sentinel. The impact wasn't enough to hurt the armor, but it was enough to shatter the ground beneath its feet. The Sentinel roared, its perfect balance momentarily lost as it stumbled, its heavy armor cracking the weak crust. It was now fully distracted, attempting to regain its footing over the unstable fissure. Now, Serafina. The cache. Ethan yelled, his position completely exposed to the enraged Sentinel. Serafina hesitated for a split second, then sprinted toward the Citadel ruins. She knew Ethan had bought her precious time, but the Sentinel would soon recover and destroy him. She found the exact spot, a piece of crystalline bedrock beneath a collapsed arch, and placed her hand on it. Vindicar Consort Serafina. Authorization Level 7. Rift key required. Override Sentinel Protocol. Null. The rock slid away, revealing a small, humming alcove. Inside, nested in a soft light, was a simple, silver flute. The Rift key wasn't a computer drive, it was a musical instrument. As Serafina grabbed the flute, the Sentinel above them emitted a high-pitched shriek of total failure. It lifted its cannon, aiming directly at Ethan for the final, killing blow. I've got it. Serafina screamed, spinning and raising the flute to her lips. The air on Xylos 7, already thin and biting, seemed to freeze as Seraphina raised the silver flute to her lips. The Sentinel, now fully recovered from Ethan's calculated distraction, was locking its cannon onto him, a final, crimson charge building in its barrel. Ethan braced for impact, his pulse rifle useless against the ancient armor. Seraphina's fingers, long and elegant, danced across the flute's intricate etchings. Then a sound emerged that defied the desolation of the ruined planet. It wasn't a melody of Earth, nor was it a simple alien tune. It was a resonance. A complex, multitonal frequency that wove itself into the very fabric of the air, vibrating the broken crystals, humming through Ethan's bones. It was the sound of creation and destruction, of time and anti-time, a sound that spoke directly to the core programming of all Vindicar technology. The Sentinel paused. Its crimson weapon charge flickered erratically. Its metallic body began to tremble, not from physical impact, but from the unbearable pressure of the sound. The resonant frequency was tearing at its corrupted core. The sound intensified, becoming a sonic wave of pure energy. It wasn't loud in a deafening way, it was overwhelming, resonating with the very atoms of the Sentinel. Ethan felt his own head ache with the strain, the influx of pure information from the Rift Key. Then the Sentinel began to disintegrate. It didn't explode. It began to fall apart at the molecular level. Its ceramic armor cracked into glowing dust, its internal wiring shimmered and dissolved, and its menacing form slowly, agonizingly, diffused into nothingness. Within seconds all that remained was a pile of fine, sparkling gray dust, which the wind immediately swept away. Silence descended, a heavy, reverent quiet broken only by the howling wind. Seraphina slowly lowered the flute, her breathing heavy, a bead of perspiration tracing a path down her silver temple. The crimson in her eyes was momentarily dimmed, replaced by an exhaustion Ethan had never seen. That, Seraphina whispered, her voice strained, was not a musical instrument, Ethan. It is a harmonic key. It unlocks the true potential of the Starlight engine. It also recalibrates Vindicar technology to its base, uncorrupted state. KRWL's corruption of the Sentinel, it could not withstand the pure frequency of the key. Ethan, still reeling from the sonic assault, slowly made his way over to her. He looked at the flute, then at the empty space where the Sentinel had been. So, the Starlight engine, it's not just a power source. It's a reality editor. More than that, Seraphina replied, carefully placing the flute into a secure, hidden pouch on her suit. It is the convergence point. The heart of our universe, capable of weaving timelines and dimensions. KRWL wants to pervert it, to force his corrupted reality onto all others. We must activate it before he merges his timeline with ours, or all reality will become his twisted vision. The mention of timelines and corrupted realities brought a fresh wave of dread. Elias Vance had been a reality, a safe one. Now, that reality felt like a threat to the entire universe. We have the key, Ethan said, his voice grim. Let's move. KRWL's ships will have picked up that energy spike. They rushed back through the desolate landscape, the remnants of the Sentinel's dust swirling around their feet. The Stinger, hidden in the geothermal vent shaft, was their only hope. As they approached the vent, a low, guttural roar echoed from within the chasm. It wasn't the mechanical hum of a drone. It was organic, predatory. What was that? Ethan whispered, raising his pulse rifle, scanning the darkness. KRWL's bombing runs disrupted the native ecosystem, Seraphina replied, her eyes narrowing. Unstable temporal rifts opened below the surface. Ancient predators, displaced from other timelines, now roamed Xylos 7. A monstrous shape, massive and reptilian, with glowing green eyes and razor-sharp teeth, lunged from the shadows of the vent shaft entrance. It was a chronobeast, a creature of pure temporal energy, drawn to the Stinger's residual temporal signature. Its maw opened, revealing rows of teeth that shimmered with displaced time. Ethan. It feeds on temporal displacement. Seraphina screamed, pushing him back. Its touch can rip you from this reality. The chronobeast roared again, its massive head snapping toward them. Its speed was terrifying, a blur of displaced energy. Lead it away from the Stinger. Ethan yelled, firing a warning shot that merely sizzled off the beast's temporal skin. I'll create a diversion with the terrain. Its mass will be its weakness. He began scrambling up the chasm wall, firing rapid shots at loose rocks, creating a small avalanche. The chronobeast, disoriented by the noise and the sudden movement, turned its attention to the falling debris. Seraphina, meanwhile, unleashed a concentrated blast of Vindicar energy at the beast's temporal hide. The blast didn't damage the creature, but it destabilized its energy field, causing it to shimmer and roar in pain. It's vulnerable to concentrated energy pulses. Serafina shouted. But it's too big for us to take down alone. We need to disable it. Ethan saw his chance. The chrono beast, still distracted by the falling rocks and Serafina's energy, was now directly beneath a massive, precariously balanced boulder at the top of the chasm. Serafina, focus your energy on that support pillar. Ethan yelled, pointing his rifle at the stone pillar that held the boulder in place. The beast will be too slow to react. They coordinated their fire, a rapid, furious barrage of pulse rifle shots and Vindicar energy blasts, all aimed at the single point. The pillar began to crack, groaning under the immense pressure. With a final, desperate surge, the pillar gave way. The massive boulder plummeted down the chasm wall, slamming into the chrono beast with crushing force. The creature roared once, a sound of pure agony and temporal distortion, before being pinned against the chasm floor, its glowing green eyes slowly fading as it dissolved back into the temporal fabric. Silence returned, heavier now. They had survived, but barely. We're wasting time, Ethan said, his voice strained from the exertion. Carwello knows we have the key. The next jump must be to the Aegis. They scrambled back into the Stinger, sealing the hatch. Ethan immediately began the pre-flight checks, his mind already calculating the next jump, the next evasion. The simple silver flute, the rift key, felt like a ticking bomb in Serafina's pouch. Set coordinates for the Cygnus rift, Serafina instructed, her gaze fixed on the desolate, dangerous landscape of Xylos 7. We're going home, Ethan. To our real home. The journey through the jump stream was brutal. The Stinger, designed for short, stealthy insertions, groaned under the sustained temporal strain. The jump fields distorted reality, bathing the cockpit in nauseating, swirling colors that threatened Ethan's newly recovered sanity. Days blurred into a single pressurized moment of high alert. Ethan and Serafina took turns at the controls, fueled by emergency rations and the sheer adrenaline of their mission. Their dialogue was minimal, focused entirely on evasion tactics and engine output, yet the silence between them was rich with the complex, shared history Elias Vance had suppressed for 20 years. Serafina spent hours in a meditative trance, healing the remnants of the temporal sickness that had ravaged her core. When she emerged, she often found Ethan staring blankly at the distant, fragmented stars. You're thinking of Isabella, she stated one cycle, her voice devoid of accusation. Ethan didn't deny it. I keep thinking when the convergence happens, when reality snaps back, what happens to her? Does the program simply shut down? Does she vanish? She was created within that timeline bubble, Ethan, Serafina explained gently. She is intrinsic to the bubble's stability. When the bubble dissolves, not when the convergence begins but when the Aegis leaves its safe harbor, the program will simply cease. She will never know she was anything less than real. That was the mercy I built into the design. The finality of her words was cold, but the intent was pure. It finally allowed Ethan to put the ghost of Elias Vance's love to rest, focusing his energy on the terrible reality of Ethan, the commander. Then let's dissolve the bubble, he said, turning back to the controls, a hard resolve setting in his jaw. Let's bring the Aegis home. They dropped out of the jump stream and into the terrifying beauty of the Cygnus rift. This was not open space. It was a swirling, star-choked nebula, a vast, complex maze of gravitational singularities and cosmic dust clouds. It was a perfect hiding spot and a perfect trap. Atmospheric distortion at 90%, Ethan reported, his hands flying across the controls, pushing the Stinger to its limit. No active Vindicar signatures detected yet, but the background radiation is extreme. Carwell is nearby. He knows we had to jump here, Serafina confirmed, monitoring the long-range scanners. His scouts will be using passive scans, trying to trace the residual temporal wake from Xylos 7. She pointed to the navigation screen. The Aegis is cloaked within the dark core, a region of highly compressed dust and antimatter residue. We must traverse the Whispering Pillars, 3 neutron star remnants that disrupt all long-range electronics. The flight through the Whispering Pillars was a nightmare. The Stinger bounced wildly as the neutron stars' immense magnetic fields played havoc with their controls. Warning lights screamed in alien languages. They were flying blind, relying on Ethan's deep memory of the rift's currents and Serafina's innate Vindicar sense of temporal flow. We have to go deeper. Ethan yelled, fighting the unresponsive controls. The antimatter field is our only true cover. They plunged into the dark core. Suddenly, the chaotic light vanished. The cockpit went black, save for the blue hum of their console. The silence was absolute. The readings normalized, the ship stabilized. They were hidden. It worked, Serafina breathed, relief flooding her face. Of course it worked, Ethan said, a faint, familiar smirk touching his lips. I designed this hiding spot myself. Only Vindicar technology can shield a ship this large from the antimatter core. He brought a hidden scanner online, key to his unique biosignature. A single, enormous blip appeared dead ahead. It was a massive angular shadow cloaked by the dust, the Aegis. They docked the tiny Stinger into the forgotten service port of their flagship. Stepping onto the bridge of the Aegis was like walking into a massive, frozen cathedral. The air was cold and stale. Dust lay thick on the immense command consoles. The lights were off and the silence was overwhelming. The only sound was the faint hum of emergency life support. She's dead, Ethan whispered, running his hand over a silent console. She's waiting for you, Serafina countered, her voice full of pride. The Aegis's central AI, Oracle, is key to Ethan's life force signature. Elias Vance couldn't turn her on, but Ethan can. They made their way to the engine core chamber, a massive cylindrical space at the heart of the ship, built to contain the universe's most powerful device. The Starlight engine stood before them, a colossal deactivated mechanism of impossibly smooth silver and gold alloys, laced with crystalline conduits. It was breathtaking and terrifying. Ethan approached the main console. He placed the data core, the tiny metallic cylinder recovered from the penthouse, into the ship's mainframe port. Immediately the entire chamber roared to life. Lights flashed, conduits glowed, and a deep, powerful voice resonated throughout the ship, a voice that was both mechanical and distinctly female. Access granted. Commander Ethan Vance, life force signature confirmed. Welcome home, my commander. System status, dormant. Initiate consciousness merge protocol. That's Oracle, Serafina explained, smiling. She's been waiting for you. The consciousness merge, Ethan said, looking at the main chair facing the engine. This is where Elias Vance truly dies. No, Serafina corrected, walking towards him. This is where he conflates. Your human empathy, your architect's meticulousness. Those are the traits that will make the Starlight engine controllable. Don't fight the fusion. Embrace the whole of yourself. She led him to the command chair. Ethan sat down, and the chair's arms immediately clamped around his wrists and temples. He felt a sharp, cold sting as neural connectors pierced his skin. Serafina, Ethan said, his voice strained. The rift key. She pulled out the silver flute. I will input the harmonic key when the merge reaches 99%. It will overload the system, forcing the convergence immediately. We must be ready. Serafina moved to the main energy conduit platform, standing ready. Ethan closed his eyes, preparing for the final, total surrender of his old self. Initiating consciousness merge. 10%. 50%. 90%. Oracle's voice counted down. The pain was beyond anything he had ever felt. It was not physical, it was the sensation of his soul being digitally mapped, compressed, and re-uploaded. He saw his earth life flash before him, the joy, the comfort, the illusion, all being consumed by the burning, vast reality of his true self. Consciousness merge, 99%. Suddenly, an alarm blared, overriding the calm voice of Oracle. Warning. External threat detected. Vindicar Shade Vessel, the Kronos anchor. Critical hull breach imminent. Serafina's eyes widened in terror. Carwell. He wasn't tracking us. He was tracking the Aegis's initial activation pulse. He jumped right to the rift the moment you engaged Oracle. Hull breach imminent. Life support system compromised. Ethan was still locked in the merge chair, his neural system screaming in agony. The merge was incomplete. He was half commander, half architect, and completely paralyzed. Serafina. You have to launch the key now. Ethan choked out. Don't wait for 100%. Force the convergence. Now. Serafina looked at the approaching energy readings of KRLL's flagship on the nearby monitor, then at Ethan, strapped to the chair, his face contorted in pain. Forcing the key now could kill him, but waiting would allow KRLL to seize the engine. She made her decision. With a desperate, feral cry, she lifted the silver flute to her lips. The fate of the universe depended on a single, dissonant, forced note. The alarm shrieked, a desperate, fading cry of the Aegis's damaged systems. KRLL's flagship, the Kronos anchor, was not just approaching. It was already initiating the hull breach protocol. They had seconds. Ethan was suspended in agony in the merged chair, his consciousness split between the safe algorithms of Elias Vance and the burning, infinite knowledge of Ethan, the commander. His human form shook violently under the incomplete fusion. Serafina didn't hesitate. She wouldn't let the man she loved be destroyed by a calculated choice. She wouldn't let their universe fall to Carewell. With a cry of pure, desperate resolve, she lifted the harmonic key, the silver flute, and played. The sound that erupted was not the controlled, pure resonance she had summoned on Xylos 7. It was dissonant, a shattering chord of forced fusion. The note hammered into the Starlight engine core. The colossal mechanism roared not with power but with pain. Crystalline conduits flared, then fractured, spraying sparks of temporal energy. The core began to spin violently, overloading the system with raw, unchecked power. Warning. Manual override detected. Convergence initiated at 99% integrity. Temporal rupture imminent. Oracle's voice screamed, dissolving into static. The Starlight engine was live but unstable. At that moment, the bridge shuddered violently. A deafening metallic shriek signaled the breach. A section of the hull above them vaporized. Through the smoky, gaping hole, Carewell and his guard, 3 towering shade drones, dropped onto the deck of the engine core chamber. Carewell was instantly recognizable. He wore a uniform similar to Seraphina's, but his armor was black and jagged, and his crimson eyes burned with cold, maniacal obsession. He was Vindicar but corrupted by his lust for control. Seraphina, Carewell hissed, his voice a distorted echo, you always were predictable. The architect was a clever hiding place, but you couldn't resist bringing him home to the engine. He ignored Seraphina and focused his attention entirely on Ethan, strapped and screaming in the chair. And there is the commander. Half soldier, half architect. Perfect. I don't need the whole of Ethan. I only need his consciousness core to pilot my new reality. Bring him to me. The 3 shade drones advanced, plasma weapons aimed at Ethan. Seraphina moved with the speed of pure necessity. You will not touch him, she yelled. Her wings snapped out, and she unleashed a torrent of concentrated Vindicar energy at the advancing drones. The blast was immense, throwing the drones back against the massive engine walls. But the sudden exertion, coupled with the instability of the Starlight engine, was too much. Seraphina staggered, collapsing to one knee, her power flickering precariously. Carewell laughed, a dry, cruel sound. Your consumption is failing, Seraphina. The unstable engine is drawing too much energy. You are weak and your husband is paralyzed. He raised his gauntlet, a dark, pulsing weapon aimed directly at Ethan's head. Farewell, Ethan. You served your purpose. But just as Carewell fired, Ethan's eyes snapped open. The familiar brown eyes of Elias Vance were gone, replaced by a swirling, chaotic vortex of cosmic blue and crimson, the mark of the incomplete convergence. A low, resonant hum emanated from Ethan's mouth. Not a scream, but a word in an ancient, forgotten Vindicar language. The energy blast Carewell fired didn't hit Ethan. It struck the Starlight engine's main conduit behind him. Because Ethan's consciousness core was already partially integrated with the engine, he had subconsciously redirected the blast. The engine flared a blinding white. The energy meant to kill Ethan was instead absorbed and amplified by the engine's massive core. Seraphina. The engine is amplifying the impact. Ethan roared, his voice now a powerful echo, laced with mechanical feedback. Carewell just gave us the final push. The engine is unstable but it's live. Get to the control axis and prime the harmonic key sequence. Seraphina, seeing the pure strategic genius of Ethan returning, found a surge of energy. She scrambled to the engine's emergency access port. Carewell, realizing his terrible mistake, lunged toward her. No. That frequency will tear my timeline to shreds. Carewell shrieked. As Carewell lunged, Ethan exerted his will through the chair's neural interface. The Aegis, now partly controlled by the incomplete convergence, reacted instantly. Internal defense systems, massive magnetic locks, slammed down from the ceiling, narrowly missing Carewell and trapping 2 of the drones. This is not a starship, Carewell. Ethan yelled, his voice now pure oracle. This is my weapon. And you just gave me the fuel. Seraphina reached the terminal and furiously typed the access codes. She took the silver flute and inserted it into a slot beside the console. This time she didn't play a manual note. She initiated the full, system-driven rift key sequence. A sound erupted that was not a note, but a universal chord. It wasn't just sound, it was light, time, and gravity, all compressed into one overwhelming frequency. The Starlight engine, now completely fused with Ethan's mind, released the stored energy. The entire core chamber was engulfed in a massive, blinding white flare. Carewell screamed as the harmonic frequency hit him. It wasn't the pure blast of the Sentinel's fate, but a violent temporal disruption. His armor began to peel away, his corrupted Vindicar form shimmering, struggling to hold on to this reality. You can't win. I am the new timeline. Kal-El screamed, but his voice was now dissolving into high-pitched static. Ethan, with a final, massive exertion of his consciousness, focused the engine's power. He didn't fire a weapon, he used the engine to edit reality. He targeted the Kronos anchor, Kal-El's flagship looming outside the hole in the Aegis's hull. The Starlight engine didn't destroy the ship. It rewrote its location. In a silent, terrifying flash, the Kronos anchor vanished, displaced millions of light-years away, cut off from the local temporal plane. Kal-El's shade fleet was instantly isolated. Kal-El, cut off from his anchor, shrieked as his form dissolved completely. His body simply ceased to exist in the Aegis's timeline. The light faded. The noise died. The Starlight engine hummed softly, stable now, fully activated. The chamber was silent, the air smelling of ozone and triumph. Ethan slumped in the merged chair, exhausted, the neural clamps releasing him with a soft hiss. He was dizzy but whole. Serafina rushed to him, helping him out of the chair. He stood, steady, no longer the shaking architect, but the resolute, battle-hardened commander. "We won," Ethan whispered, running his hand over his face. "We did, my love," Serafina replied, holding him tightly. "You integrated the engine. You saved us. But there is a cost." Ethan looked down at his hands. They weren't the pale, soft hands of Elias Vance. They were stronger, etched with faint, crystalline patterns beneath the skin. His eyes were now a permanent, deep violet, the true color of the uncorrupted Vindicar human hybrid. He was no longer Elias, nor fully Ethan. He was the convergence. "The timeline bubble," he said, the words heavy with finality. "Isabella." Serafina nodded, her eyes sad. When the engine ignited, the bubble collapsed. The timeline of Elias Vance is gone. She is at peace. Ethan closed his eyes, accepting the grief for the man he had been, and the woman he had loved in a manufactured life. He opened his eyes, and there was only the commander. "We have the engine. We can rebuild the Lyra fleet," Ethan said, turning to the massive core. "But Kal-El is still out there, displaced but not destroyed. We have a universe to protect, Serafina." Serafina smiled, a tired, fierce, beautiful Vindicar smile. Her eyes, still crimson from the temporal strain, met his violet gaze. "Then let us begin, Commander. We have a universe that requires its true leader. And your wife will be right here beside you." The Aegis, now humming with the power of the Starlight engine, slowly began to stir in the dark of the Cygnus Rift, ready to bring the new leader and his alien vampire wife into the next chapter of the war.